Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds, and today I'm joined by the Dead Aussie Gamer. How are you doing today, sir?
G'day, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me here.
Nice. You even said good day.
You know what? There's so many words that I just don't even realize I say. G'day, crikey, struth is one of them.
Nice.
Some that I can't say for polite audiences, but yeah,
You're staying on brand.
yeah, that's it.
So, for anyone who doesn't know, want to give us the quick spiel on who you are and what you do?
Right. So my name's Michael, and as said, I'm the Dead Aussie Gamer. I am a performer and role player, as well as a professional game master from Perth, Western Australia. Apart from featuring on a number of different shows on YouTube and Twitch to play role-playing games and GM, I also work for my local government running games for young adults at a youth center, kind of more handling kids who, sort of have various forms of social anxiety or even just have a really strong passion for like nerd culture and some of the more, role-play-esque sort of games and teach them how accepted it is to be able to make friends and play these sorts of games in a safe and encouraging space.
So basically, you play games for a living,
That is literally all I do, mate. I just I play games for a living.
and then you also stream games and are on streams as well. So a lot of gaming going on. Where did the moniker Dead Aussie Gamer come from?
Okay, so so Dead Aussie Gamer actually comes from two elements. The first element is the word DAG. So DAG, which is the acronym of Dead Aussie Gamer, DAG is something that we as Australians call someone who's stupid, like, oh, you bloody DAG. That's the phrase. So going by DAG just seemed really appropriate for me. For people who know me, I'm a little bit clumsy, very very hyperactive, and very happy to admit when I make some rather stupid mistakes. Um, the other side of it came from when I wanted to originally go into video game streaming and stuff like that. It never took off because I always get to like kind of a zone when I game, so I don't talk to anyone. I didn't, it was so hard for me to concentrate and do stuff. And it was called Dead Aussie Gamer because at the time my internet was so shit. It basically got to a point where anytime I got into someone's game or anytime I tried to start playing, I'd die within seconds, and it would be quite literally, oh, is that Dead Aussie Gamer?
Yeah.
And that
What
was literally it.
for a while I was playing League of Legends, and there was one particular game that stands out because my mother-in-law had taken the kids and done something and broke down, and I had to run out and get them. And surprisingly, the game was still going on when I came back. So I jumped back into it, and Gangplank just like one shot at my character because I was so far behind in levels, and he just like exploded. But
Yep.
I
Oh.
don't game anymore because I'm terrible at it and I don't have time.
See, I always go with games that I can solo, things that
Yeah.
I can like, so if it's got a multiplayer element, fantastic. But if I can just feel good about myself, because no one knows when I stuff up unless I stream it. So that was kind of the case until I started streaming it. I think the first game I played was the Fear series, and that was really funny. I'll admit that, but I couldn't do it because it was just so stressful. I spent so much time because I hate children. Like those kind of little baby kids in horror movies and
uh,
stuff, like Children of the Corn and stuff. I couldn't do it, man. I couldn't do it.
I was gonna say
And
you're in the wrong profession.
profession, yeah. No, I tell people that all the time. It's like, yeah, no. Role playing with kids is okay because I spend half my time pretending that they're not kids. Like that's just it's the headspace I'm in.
Nice. Well, I used to like playing League just because it was a game like I could play, and in like 45 minutes it would be done. Now, like if I were to play something else where there's advancement and there's a plot, like I'd be like, oh, and 3 days later I'll be coming out of my basement going, what happened? What day is it?
Oh
So
man.
so I kind of have a little bit of an addictive personality at times. So I'm just like, it's all or nothing. So I'm like, yeah, I can't have a family, run a business, and do RPG gaming and do video games. So something
Well, did
something
did,
that
did
gets
you ever
cut
get
out.
into the MMO scene at all?
No, I totally missed it. Matter of fact, when I played games that are now MMOs, like StarCraft and World of Warcraft, they were real time strategy games at that time. They had not made the shift yet.
No, man, I used to really rock Dota when Warcraft 3 was a big thing.
Yeah.
But then when World of Warcraft came out, I started doing stuff with that and got into the MMO scene. I tell you what, there are years of my life that have just absolutely vaporized between like World of Warcraft, Wildstar, geez, like yeah, what was that one? Guild Wars. Yeah, just so many that I've just so many time sinks. And yeah, I realized no, I need to move out of my parents' house. I need to stop working at a butcher, and I need to maybe look at getting an education because I'm 24 now. Uh,
So you get some love from Kuwait. Poisons over there. Man, I just loved your Jagsy character in Call of the Kraken.
Oh, thanks, dude. Like, look, Jagsy was by far one of my favorite characters. Actually, one of the big things for me, one of the very moment-defining, I think, elements to Dead Aussie Gamer as I was meeting Guy from How to Be a Great Game Master. Like, hands down, one of the nicest people I've ever met. Easily one of my best friends, who sadly doesn't live in my country. Um, when I met Guy and we started role playing together, we just complemented each other so well, and we loved each other's company. So he asked me to do the Dungeons and Dragons game. He basically turned to me one day and said, "Hey, Mike, listen, I've got a game on, and you're not going to like this, but it's going to be at 2 a.m. your time and run through till 5 a.m." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, all right, that's fine." And then he said, "Oh, it's for Dungeons and Dragons." I'm like, "Yeah, I know we're playing Dungeons and Dragons." He said, No, it's for Dungeons and Dragons. They want to do like a European, international kind of show." And I was like, "Okay, well, I mean, that kind of determines what I can play. If they're looking for an international show, what they're not really going to be looking for is a guy that looks Southeast Asian from Australia trying to play a Scottish dwarf, right? Like that's just not it." So I heavily lent into that character and played Jaggerjaw, who was my Sharkan Ranger. This like sort of a mix between Australian and New Zealand shark man who was just he was actually really gentle for a character. Like he came from a warrior race, a proud and violent race, thick Australian accent. And the biggest part of Jagsy was that no matter what he wanted to do, all he really wanted was to build boats. Just build ships, not have to tear things up or chew things down or break things. Just build ships. And it was always really funny because when we met up with the team, we hadn't really had a game zero properly. So the captain's all like, "Jaggerjaw, you get on the cannons." "Oh, okay." "Get on the cannon, put the big shark on the cannons because he must be violent." Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a great character. I loved him to bits.
That's funny. He's like, "I want to build ships. I don't want to tear them down."
That was it.
There he is, learning the shot.
Oh yeah, yeah. And what's worse is that was actually the beginning of an ongoing thing for me and Guy, because I featured in a few more shows with Guy after that, and in each of these ones, in some way, shape, or form, I was responsible for a vehicle in some places. We did a podcast where I played this Jamaican man who was the pilot of a ship, and all I had to do was drive around, listen to my tunes and read my comic books. Not even joking. We hit a freaking rock. The vehicle turned sideways. We tried to replace a broken tire, and a rock fell on the vehicle. All I had was this big fat Jamaican dude who only knew how to drive, that with no vehicle. And so we ended up having to walk through the desert for days. And everyone's like, "Oh, cool. We're making, fortitude saves in order to try and keep our endurance up." And there's my guy like sweating bacon, like, oh.
The driver concept is always like a fun, cool idea until you actually play it. Because it's like, there's never really much to do. And it's like all or nothing. It's like, I remember like my first top secret character was the driver guy, and the GM was just like, yeah, we need to give you a secondary skill too, just so you have other things to do. uh, but it's in my head, it seems so cool at the time. But then when you realize you're not going to be driving inside of buildings and government installations, it's just not as exciting as it once seemed.
Oh no, that's true. But you know what? I've always been a very battlefield orientated person, like don't get me wrong, I love games where you're like, out in the field and on foot, doing battles and stuff like that. But I always find like this level of dynamic gameplay that occurs when you play characters like, in a cart or on a vehicle or on a dirigible or, and you can pull out some just wacky and amazing maneuvers that shift the entire engagement. I kind of like that. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily run an entire game based on that one premise, but for me, as soon as the opportunity shows up to like really throw in down with some like land overland speed movement, I'm always game for a little bit of mischief on a vehicle.
Yeah, and especially if you play a lot of like fantasy games, that's a nice change of pace if you play a different genre, and like you're gonna want to use those things that aren't in that genre, like cars or starships or whatever it is you're playing. Are you currently on any shows right now?
So right now I'm kind of in between a few different seasons at the moment. Right now, the only active show I have currently is a show that I'm doing on a group called Mercs of Mischief, called the Avalon Society London Falls. It's a game called Through the Breach, which is based off the tabletop war game Malifaux. And it follows the story of five characters from London in the early 1900s during an event where these massive portals appear over London and drop like deep sea water onto the city, like basically flooding it, destroying buildings and the like. And the story is basically these guys trying to survive the night as demons and things pour from the these portals, and they try to avoid like there are even portals that are like tiny pinpricks that create like pressure cutters from the water and stuff. Lots of these little challenges and stuff for them to go through. And it's actually a big cast of really famous people on that one. So Guy's one of my players on that one. In addition, I have Janet from World Anvil, who is always a delight. Till from Dungeon Fog, who is also an incredibly talented individual. Myri from Orkenspalter TV, and Anthony from Roll for Damage, who's another fellow Aussie streamer. So these guys do an amazing job trying to survive everything I throw at them.
So we had you on the show a couple years back, and I think we had you on then. You had recently just done like a Guinness World Record challenge.
Yes.
Do you guys still hold the record?
Oh, okay. So we hold the unofficial record for the challenge. It was 86 hours. We did complete it. It was done to the best of everyone's ability, which was great. We did have a lot of paperwork issues that ended up putting things in basically just this admin limbo hell. And one of the things that we needed to do was we needed to go over the 86 hours of footage and check every increment as we went through. And obviously with just so much stuff and so much commitments and things, we never really got around to getting those documents to line up properly for to be able to put
I
it
know
through.
you got robbed. What was the challenge? Just so for people that don't know what we're talking about.
All right, so for the Guinness World Book of Records, there is a world's longest board game. There's no world's longest role playing or any of that sort of stuff, and we wanted to set the record. At the time that I wanted to set it, the record was being held at around about 50 hours and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool, I can do 50 hours. I've done 50 hours on a good Easter, that's easy. What then happened shortly after I decided that I was going to set this up was these guys from Europe played a game that involved a duck and a D6. And all that they did was they rolled this D6, they moved a token, and they just kept doing laps around this tiny board, and then every time they did a lap, they just added 1 to their score.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
They did
Yeah,
that for
hold on,
70.
hold on. I just want to say one thing for you, real quick. Fuck those
Yeah.
guys and their duck.
Fuck those guys. Yeah, fuck those guys and the duck they rode in on.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
That pissed me off because I was sitting there going, "Oh my god, this is like the barest minimum qualification for a game." You know, I was just like, I mean, I don't get me wrong. Like having done it myself, full respect for the endurance, right? But still, that was not a fucking game. Anyway, we then upped our ante. We basically went, okay, you know what? We can't do this for 60 hours and stuff. So we went for the big mark, the 80-hour mark. We went, fuck it, we're going to do 80 hours, and that's what we're going to do. That's where we're going to set it. So we set everything up, got everything lined up, and we ran Pathfinder First Edition's Rise of the Rune Lords from start to finish. Plus, I added in some custom side quests for each of my players as well. So we had just chockers of content. I spent 8 months training. So we went to like sleep schools and academies to figure out like, you know, what best like diet to have and what timing periods we should be introducing things like we all detoxed as well. No sugar, no low lactose, no caffeine. And then we didn't have any of that until like the 3rd day. It was like, there was a whole schedule thing. It was a big thing.
I'm picturing this training montage in my head.
It was. I mean, I wish it was a montage. We had to live through the whole thing. I kid you not, right? For those of you in the audience who wonder, how does Michael have so much energy? How does he not burn out running 15 to 20 games a week? That is because I live off a very, very delicate diet of sugar and protein. That's literally it. So for me, going on a detox with no sugar and no caffeine was a whole thing. And in the end, we had everything ready. All the players had done what they needed to do. Every single player had a character sheet for their character from level 1 to 20. So they all had like the previously leveled up, bought all their stuff and all that sort of stuff. They had binders basically. So whenever we leveled up, they just went, because we didn't know if they were going to turn around and say, "Oh, that's not playing the game. You're building characters." So we're like, yeah, okay, you know what? We'll get it all there. And we got started straight away. But after the first, I want to say 5 hours, one of the people, one of the volunteers noticed that the clock was just out of focus on the camera that we were recording on. And so we tacked on another 6 hours to this, to the thing, because we then moved the clock right next to the camera and then kept it going. To get the record, we basically had to go for the 86 hours, and we did get a chance to rest, but every hour earned us 5 minutes of rest. So every 6 hours, we had a half an hour break, which we used 10 minutes to eat or, you know, sort of wash our faces and clean up or whatever. And then 20 minutes of a nap. Doesn't matter when it was just you sleep for 20 minutes flat out. And we did this on repeat without pause for the full 86 hours.
That is crazy. That's impressive. 86 hours. So now I can say at this point in my life, I have worked 2 48-hour shifts. So that is, you know, essentially half of what you're talking about, almost half of what you're talking about. And at that point, you are delirious. You have no idea what's going on. And it is just crazy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay. So I've got 4 stories. I'm going to limit it to 4 stories because clearly there are more stories in that period of time, but I'll tell you these ones. The first story is of the ghost of the Coburn Youth Center. Now, we are very spiritual as people, individuals in Australia. And as we were playing on the second night, everyone unanimously turned around and was like, dude, which volunteer is walking around behind us? Like, there's no cameras and stuff like that. And, you know, you can actually see us looking around at something or someone that's moving around behind us while we're playing. We watch the footage again, and you can actually see a shadow moving as we're looking at it. That was trippy as hell. We're not sure if that was us being delirious or if it was a trick of the light, or we noticed that maybe the light had shifted, but, you know, who knows? But we have a recording of a ghost on that on that attempt. The second story, obviously, as you can imagine, when you kind of get to a point where you have so much sleep deprivation, you start to lose your grounding in what's real and what's not. When you are obviously actively throwing out things for people's imaginations, you start to visualize things, you start to see stuff. Like, for example, we had like little cutout miniatures that we had on the board. And for a second, I think I felt like they were coming closer to me, and I actually felt like they were encroaching on my space, and I actually got kind of angry at them, and I didn't want to actually use the map for a while because I was just like, nah, they're all up in my space, right? They're pissing me off. They're trying to come at me. I was getting really aggressive at these little freaking minis. So that was story number 2. That was a bit weird. Story number 3. At some point or another, I fell asleep while standing up, continuing to roleplay. I blacked out. I literally got through an entire chapter, which is recorded, and I have watched it, where I have my eyes closed. I am standing up in front of my players, and I am speaking fluently exactly what I needed to be saying at that point in the time. And I had apparently, like, again, my brain had just switched off. And it wasn't until one of my players sort of like, and I'd stopped tilting, and I got back up and kept going. That I managed to pull through that one. And the last story, and this was probably the most terrifying one, is I think at like 3 a.m. on the final day, I lost my voice. And I don't mean I lost my voice like, I'm talking really quietly. I mean my like vocal cords, no matter how much I tried, nothing came out. And they had to go and like emergency go get me an anesthetic for my vocal cords from the pharmacy, like from the 24-hour pharmacy. And they were like, yeah, okay, cool. We'll also get the guy who's, sort of there to come in and maybe have a look and see what's up. And on one of the breaks, got looked at just to make sure that I hadn't like ripped apart my throat. But yeah, those are 4 of the crazy antics that happen when you play role-playing games for 86 freaking hours.
They say you gotta suffer for your art, man.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. But you know what? There is a plus side. There is a silver lining. I have never, ever turned down anyone who has offered to run me a game or to even run a game for someone. If they say like, oh, it's a 4 a.m. start, Michael, we don't want you to get up early. I'm like, what are you talking about? Sleep. Sleep is an option.
It is an option. So we're going to be playing in a game coming up the 9th. So in a couple weeks from now, like a week and a half, I guess. It's a new RPG that doesn't actually exist yet. Me and Ted have played a couple sessions as well as Nerder Doug of it called Maximum Apocalypse. It's based off of a board game that did really well on Kickstarter. And the company is fairly local to me and Ted, Delaware. So it's like 45 minutes probably away from us. So we're gonna be doing like a premiere game when they launch their Kickstarter for it. And I don't know, have you had a chance to look over the quick start rules?
I have. I've looked over a little bit. I've looked over mostly the character building.
Yeah.
Because I'm that kind of player, like the one that's sort of like, oh, I should really know about the rules and understand how the mechanics should work. And I'm like, no, I want to know what I can play.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. So it's real simple. The apocalypse has happened, and now you're just trying to survive. But there's like a menu of a bunch of different apocalypses, so you can play it where you're all from the same kind of apocalypse, or you can kind of mix and match. Is what we did in a couple games that we played, where we had a bunch of different ones, and made some different characters. And it's a fun system. It's a little on the crunchy side, so if you're not into crunchy, then that might be a bit of a deterrent. But I did find, as far as crunchy systems go, it played pretty smoothly, once we had our characters and got started. So I'm excited. You'll be on the game. Casey Mikado will be on the game, and Eugenio, DM Jazzy Hands will be on the game, as well as me and Ted, and then Scott, the designer, is going to be running it for us. So that should be a lot of fun. I'm interested to see what your apocalypse character is like.
Well, I mean, I'll admit, I kind of was really tempted to do the Paul Hogan kind of Crocodile Dundee type of survivor, you know, like either play him like a veteran or whatever, like just this thick-skinned Australian bloke who's like, you
Yeah.
know. And I was looking at the different apocalypses as like like what is your own apocalypse? And okay, so I'm a bit of a fan of Rick and Morty, you know, as most people are. And I kind of love the idea of the cybernetic crocodile rebellion. So like basically someone in an alternate Earth put like a whole bunch of cybernetic parts on crocodiles to try and get them to like replace the workforce. But they went mad, and now cybernetic crocodiles rule the world,
What could go
and
wrong?
humans are, yeah, and humans are basically farmed for like food and stuff. Like they become the new cattle, and
Yeah, like
um,
I think the apocalypses are like the coolest part of the game because you have like the alien invasion, zombie, big oil fail, kaiju, rapture is one of them. Obviously, robot is one of them.
I thought Rapture was a bit on the nose. I looked at that one. And I was like, I love it, but damn, that's take some brass.
There's a yeah. There's a pandemic one. Oh yeah, because really, like technically, if you go with the rapture one, that means everyone that's left is just a shitty person.
Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah, it's like everyone has to be an asshole. Everyone has like it's like, oh, you know what? And all I could think to myself is, even if you weren't an asshole in that bit, right? You would have to be someone who would like live their life, you know, in the best way they could possibly be, a great and wonderful person, and then not getting raptured up when everyone else did. You'd be so pissed.
Oh yeah,
You'd be
like
so fucking
it was just
angry.
a clerical error someplace. Someone like didn't check the right box and you got missed.
Was that a D&D joke? Was it a clerical error?
It could be. Yeah, sure. Why not? But yeah, so that should be a lot of fun, and you know, for us, we play so much D&D. I always find it refreshing when we get to play something else. The biggest problem for me is it's like learning a new rule set, right? It's like we're so busy, and it's like, well, we could play D&D or we could play something else, but like you're looking at this 400-page rule book or whatever. Matter of fact, when my buddy Todd plays in, had played in we were calling it our micro celebrity game. It was one of the early games where we recorded, and he was like an up and coming, or he was trying to break into designing board games. Another couple we were gaming with, Garwood Fortress. They were also doing the same thing, and both of them had gone on to put out some decent games at this point. And so we'd been playing D&D for a while, and he's like, hey, I got this game, do you guys want to check it out? And my first question is, how big is the rule book? So and it worked out because like they're like willing to just run it for us, and we like went through, like, the first scenario is called Get to the Van, which is literally like you start with no gear, you just have the characters, and and as you can guess, we're trying to get to a van. But so it made it really easy. So when we can get a game that someone will run for us, so we could just like get through the character creation process and learn the rules as we go, that is my jam.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. Like having someone be able to show you exactly how to kind of get into it and stuff, is such a big relief. And that's 90% of what I do at the youth center is, when I teach people how to role play. In my mind, if you run a game, the more familiar you are with the system, the more you're able to just make sure that the players can just sit back and enjoy and embrace the system, the more likely they're going to pick that up by themselves and look into it more and expand their own knowledge. If you kind of throw a big heavy book at someone, you pretty much get the same response. They look at it and they go, and they throw it back.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah,
well, and also, like, me personally, I just don't retain information that well. So if I just read it, I'll be like, by the time we would actually start playing, I would have forgotten half of what I read anyway. But if I actually do the thing, it's just so much easier to learn it that way.
Well, I mean, speaking of crunch and big thick rule books, recently I was in a discussion with Lee from Master the Game regarding Pathfinder Second Edition and the rule book involved with that, which I think was like a 600 something page, something I could kill my grandma with. Like it was a big chunky book filled with some great stuff in it. Have you played the second edition yet?
I have not. I mean, like we were looking at some of the playtest stuff, but it's like, so I guess like we're kind of like, well, we have our fantasy RPG, and if we're going to play fantasy, we're probably just going to play that. Like when we branch out from D&D, it's to go into another genre, pretty much, almost always.
No, absolutely, absolutely makes sense. I did the playtest of because for me my go-to was always Pathfinder because I came from like 3.5 and
Mm.
didn't go into 4E. I went into Pathfinder, and so second edition was so appealing to me. And then I saw the book and I got into it, and now I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like, man, I really really want to play this game. And as you're saying, I keep bringing it up to people and being like, hey, do you want to play Pathfinder second edition? And everyone looks at the size of the book and goes, we have D&D fifth ed. That's pretty cool. I even had someone turn around and say we had oh geez, what was it? GURPS. That they were still playing GURPS, and I was like, oh, okay. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I'll put this back in my bag now. I felt for the first time, I felt like a kid. Like kind of like I was getting told off by my parents. I'm like, Mom, Dad, look at this picture I drew, and they didn't even put it up on the fridge. So yeah, it was but you know what, I despite the big thick book, I'm very interested to find out what people are thinking about it, because I think right now they're doing PaizoCon at the moment as well, so people have kind of come out of the woodworks with now a couple of months of having to really digest the material to find out what people have kind of discovered over their experiences.
So I guess part of it too is, and it, I tend to kind of lean more towards rules light nowadays. And the older I get, the more I kind of feel that way. But I just out of curiosity, I just looked up 2E Pathfinder conditions, right? And like I'm seeing at least 22. So
Yeah.
there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
going on there. And like, you know what though, I'm not like that much of a snob. If someone's like, hey, I'm running this game, do you want to jump in on it? And I was like, can I get a pre-gen? I'd be like, sure, I'm in. Let's do the thing. Or I'd make the character. Like we made characters, right, for 2A,
Hmm.
which I found that process interesting. But you really do need a much higher level rules mastery for a game like that if you want to build a if you want to build a mechanically viable character. Because
Hmm.
I did not. I was like, oh, a goblin and an alchemist. This sounds great. And then based on the choices you make, you're like, oh, you're not going to be very good at a lot of things.
Oh man,
um,
you know what? I've actually got an interesting thing on that. So a lot of people talk about min maxes, right?
yeah.
I love max minning, right? Basically, I find how crap can I make this thing mechanically and still function in a game.
Yeah.
I've done things like I've played anemic monks, who have had like I think like 6 or 7 constitution, small race with like next to no might, and then seen how I went, and just to kind of feel out how low you can get a game, and you can get some pretty fun stuff going. Um, I think Pathfinder. The only reason I would ever play Pathfinder is if I, as a GM, wanted to allow my players that level of customization in their character. If they were into character building and the theory boards and stuff like that, sure, Pathfinder I definitely play. But if I want to just play a game, tell a good story, and have a good time, definitely I agree with you. Simpler systems just make for much more painless games.
And well, and also too, like from it depends what you're doing too. Like from the world where you come from, where you're doing a lot of streaming games, you're either streaming them or you're playing on cast. The more complex the game is, I feel like is the worse it is for a stream. Like first of all, generally like the combat stuff is the least interesting thing that happens. But when it does happen, it's usually time consuming, and if it's super complex, I feel like you're gonna start really like boring the audience at that point
Yeah.
where you guys are like trying to figure out rules and there's lots of dice rolling and it just goes on and on and on.
Oh no, absolutely. I actually have a personal rule of mine in regards to that, where I have a 3-turn rule. In 3 turns, something has to change, something has to give, something needs to dynamically shift or alter in anything you do in combat. Um, I will not go to a fourth turn. I would sooner have the orc fall on his sword than carry on into round four. Um, I've had scenarios where actually recently in that Through the Breach game I was mentioning, I had a scenario where the group ambushed this demon, shot it in the face with a gun, and the demon was killed in the first round. Um, it then sort of evolves, as it were, because special magicy wibbly wobbly stuff, and they get into a bit of a battle with it, and it flies outside of the bell tower they're fighting it and starts like wrenching it to try and pull it over. You don't have to just go into the I kick your shin, you kick my shin, I kick your shin, you kick my shin, because that's where it gets so boring. For me,
Yeah.
it's that dynamic, like stuff's happening, and there's that cinematic nature to it, and I think that's the best kind of performance, I guess,
And that
you can
creates
watch.
way more tension. So now it's like the players are like, what do they do? Are they going to do they just try and stop the demon from wrenching the tower over? Are they just going to try and get out of the tower so it doesn't get collapsed on them? Like, yeah, there's more decisions to be made and more points where the story can really change as to like you said, do I kick it in the shin? You kick me in the shin, and it just goes back and forth forever. Uh,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and that's kind of that's the key for streaming games, because in your home game it doesn't matter. Like, so there's definitely a lot of people that will do the I kick you in the shin thing for hours and enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But on a stream, when you have an audience, it's less interesting. Even like when I was watching Critical Role, I like the parts I liked least was the combats. Like, I would like we were reviewing it, so that was the main reason why I was watching it, and I found it somewhat enjoyable. Like, I felt like it was like an amazing 2 hours worth of entertainment spread over like 4 hours or 5 hours, right? And that's just like, I just don't enjoy watching stream games. It's just not my thing. But we were doing it, and I would cast it to my TV, and like the fights would happen, and my wife would be like, "Are you awake?" And I would just fall asleep during the fights. I
Oh man.
enjoyed the interactions between Matt as the NPCs and the players with each other. And like, I think for a stream game, like the sweet spot is like 2 hours. Like anything
Mm.
longer that is like seems excessive.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I actually had a talk about this with a few people from different streams, like, how long should a stream go? And I think there are two formats that work best for any good game. Either a one sitting all the way through for 2 hours, or a 3 hour stream with like a break in the middle, like an actual, not necessarily a commercial break, but a
Hmm.
way to like engage with an audience. I did a game called Broken World Chronicles, and we played for 1.5 hours, and that was just solid gameplay. We then had a half an hour break where the audience could then ask us questions. Like, we would respond to everything people were saying. They'd tell us what they thought about what was happening. They'd make their predictions for what was going to happen. It turns from being a passive engagement to an active engagement where, that's just changed the dynamic a bit. And then we do another hour and a half, and then when we broadcasted it later on, it'd be two 1.5 hour episodes rather than, again, the 1 3 hour one. Because, trying to find 3 hours a day to dedicate to watch or to listen to these guys play games, when, let's be honest, everyone wants to play games,
Yeah.
is tough. It's a tough call. It's a tough thing to find.
Well, if you just think about it too from the audience perspective, like say you're someone that enjoys stream games, right? Like how many stream games a day can you really enjoy if they're, a short one is 2 hours, right? And a long one's 4 or 5. Like, there's only so many hours in the day. So literally they've got to pick like which streams do I really like, which streamers are the ones that I'm going to watch. So, and now we have like tons of people that are streaming. Like everybody with a webcam and a mic now wants to stream games of D&D and RPGs, right? So
Webcam and a mic, just saying.
yeah, boom. So so like it's so competitive, and it's so much more competitive compared to like other forms of entertainment, like you know, talking head videos or even podcasts that are a little bit easier to take with you because it requires so much more of a chunk out of someone's life.
Mm. No, absolutely. And I think, you know what, I there are so many streams out there that I think, and it breaks my heart because so many that I catch that have such low numbers of people watching them are such good quality stuff, but just because of the saturation or even what time of day it's in, there's just no attention to them.
Or Twitch is
Like
terrible for figuring out what's streaming and who's on, and
yeah, oh my God, like it pains me sometimes, and that's I suppose that's one of the big reasons why when I do shows I much prefer to show up on other people's channels than my own. So I do my own content, of course. I have my own YouTube channel. I have my own games that I run on my Twitch, but at the end of the day, that is more of a vanity project than anything else for me. I create stuff because people enjoy it, and I want people to enjoy it, but not just the audience, but the players that I'm running with. For me, I'm an entertainer. I've always been an entertainer. You know, you put me in front of a camera, and I am going to love every second of it. If you like, and if anyone's watching and you are a streamer, seriously, reach out to me. Say, hey, do you want to come play a game with me? That is my wheelhouse. That's what I love doing. I love going out, meeting cool role players like Dave, like Ted, like Guy, and all that. And I love just playing and meeting people who are just as passionate. Because once you get to that point where you are just sharing that passion with people, you know, people who are cool and awesome are going to flock to you to role play because, you know, we can see how much you're having fun. We can see how much you care about the hobby and you want, you know, people to be around you that are like that, you know. At least that's where I'm at, you know.
you so the D&D stream you guys did, that was like 2 seasons, right?
So we've done one season so far. This was Minion Quest, our D&D 5th edition adventure, which
Mm-hmm.
was really, it was just focused on being a comedy, at least initially. We kind of got a little bit serious towards the end, but, you know, finales tend to, you know. But yeah, it was designed as a group of monsters who were very sapient, having to leave their dungeon, the safety of their like kind of understood world, and go out into a fantasy world. But there were little elements to the world that made it, I suppose, made it interesting for them because they weren't being perceived as monsters. Peasants, for example, couldn't identify them as monsters. They would look at the orc and say, wow, you look rather ill, but at least you're big and strong. And they wouldn't register, oh, that's an orc. And the grung, which was this yellow frog person, oh, some poor jaundiced child seems to have stumbled into the village. You know, and it was just this really nice exchange where the group was expecting this adventuring game where they go out and they have to go kill heroes and play a monster game. What I introduced them to instead was they went to a very peaceful town where they actually just were really nice people who were doing really nice stuff to them. And it
Curse
wasn't
them
until yeah,
and
that
their
was
nice
pretty much
stuff.
it. Well, the first thing they did when they entered this town was they tried to steal some cabbages from the sheriff. So they jumped over the fence and they're like, you know, stealing some cabbages, and then the sheriff catches them, and they're instantly like, oh yeah, cool, we'll ambush him and we'll steal his cabbages. And he goes, you there, you're new to town, right? You look hungry, take more. And he loads them up with just a bunch of more cabbages. And this guy, the rogue who has been stealing this, is just like, I don't know where to go. I don't know how to respond to this. And you know, from that point on, it became just a real wholesome game. The group integrated with the town. They got to know everyone. They became really popular. There was even a couple of budding romances as well. Um, then along came the paladin, who, of course, you know, in my own twisted sense of shattering expectations, the paladin was obsessed with his own legend, the slayer of monsters, the killer of beasts, and he knew that they were monsters, but couldn't kill them in public because, of course, they were friends to the town. So he was trying to manipulate things so that they would reveal themselves as monsters. He would kill them and then become the hero. So there was this really tense kind of audience interaction between this guy whose name was Lord Valiance and the group. Yeah, so that was the premise of the game. So season 1 is available on YouTube, which you can see on my channel, The Dead Aussie Gamer. And season 2 is slated to begin on the our 13th of June, sorry, 13th of June our time. And yeah, season 2 is looking to take our heroes to the frigid, frozen north and dip into my Skyrim fandom and knowledge and love.
Who's in that game?
All right, so it's a bunch of Australian guys and girls who I've done a little bit of work with here and there. The first is Tabitha, who is a person who makes materials for a company called Roll for Loot, a great merchandise place. They've got like a whole bunch of like t-shirt printing stuff and 3D model printing stuff. Ryan, who is from Isolated Gaming as a podcast, another Perth-based bloke, really fun and awesome guy. Oh wait, actually, probably should tell you who they're playing. So Tabitha is playing a ghost, and it's a ghost cleric who was murdered, and she's kind of like fueled by vengeance. She floats around basically just trying to act all like, sinister and evil, but at the same time she really likes her team, and she really gets to like some of the people in town. The Ryan plays Manfred, our manticore wizard, who is so manticores aren't your typical four-legged, human-faced creatures. In my world, they were evolved by the elves as a servitor race and turned into more anthropomorphized soldiers that would work for them. They then became kind of akin to the Spartans and abandoned the elves and became like very warlike. They hate old people and they hate magic. And Manfred is playing a venerable manticore wizard.
Yeah.
So he's like this dottery old man, and
Is he full of self-loathing?
Oh no, actually he's not. But the real funny thing is he is filled with some really old D&D reference jokes that he throws out on occasion. Like someone turned around and said, "How old are you, Manfred?" And he said, "Well, let me ask you this, young'un. Do you pay gold for experience? I am that old. Back in my day, a dwarf couldn't be a wizard." And little things like that from earlier editions of D&D, which I don't know. Ryan's just absolutely delightful. We then have Ben, who plays Sticky Fingers, who's our New York-inspired grung rogue. He is just a barrel of chaos that happens so often, and yet for some reason he's the moral compass of the group. Every now and then they'll have moments where they're like, maybe we should kill these random civilians, and then you'd hear from the back this voice sort of going, "Hey, oh, come on, wait a minute, I don't think this is a good idea. Maybe we should reconsider what we're doing. I don't know how I became the moral compass, but you put me in charge of this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to knock them out and we're going to steal their stuff, but then we're going to leave an apology note straight on their body." And, he's just so much fun. And that's played by Ben Cozzi, who has his own Lego channel where he builds little Lego dioramas for role-playing games.
Okay. Oh, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Although less cool after Kappa, but
Yeah. Then we have Nick, who plays probably our most popular character, Brick the Orc, who is based off Pacific Island coastal kind of orcs, very akin to sort of like those like a pirate kind of, but at the same time he's just this big oafish dude who's just simple. And he likes to spend most of his time just getting to know people, eating food, and telling people to shut their mouths. He's pretty funny. Like when it comes to just some of the bizarre ideas that crop up into his head. I think at one point or another they were confronted by this giant winter warg, and Brick had no context of what was going on. Everyone was trying to talk to the winter warg, who was trying to eat some civilians, and they're like, "No, don't eat the civilians." And the winter warg's like, "Why? I'm a monster. You're a monster. They're people. We eat them. That's what happens." Brick jumps out of a pit trap that he had fallen into, grabs the leg of this wolf and drags it into the pit trap. Both a very angry winter warg and Brick plummet into like this tar and feather trap, and pretty much for the rest of the game was calling himself Chicken Brick.
As you do when you get tired and feathered. Perfect.
As one does,
Uh,
and yeah, no, the like I said, the group is just a fantastic cast of people that just play off each other so well. They've very quickly become a family, and I just love every minute that I spend with them.
I so I believe there's actually a pretty big video gamer Australian that is actually a fan of D&D. Like we've had some like early. It's been years now where we had some interactions with him through our channels. So I can only assume that means he's into D&D. Tier Odin. Look up his channel and you should stalk him and see if you can get him to play some D&D with you. Because he's a fellow Aussie as well, I believe. Unless I'm completely
How do I
wrong.
spell that?
Tyr, Tyr, like the god Tyr, and then Odin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that would be a cool get if you could get. We tried like hooking something up a couple times, but time differences is really hard. We can only get psychos like you and Gareth, to interact with us in the same times. Like Gareth would always make fun of us. He's like, "You guys always do things in the middle of the night."
Oh
Which,
yeah, no,
fair
no,
enough.
I know what you mean. And you know what? Like the weird thing is like, okay, so here's kind of like a little bit of a sad truth about Australians. Australia is a fundamentally sporting nation. It's a sporting culture, and for the longest time, even comparatively to like the States and stuff, there has been bullying and stuff like that, like really keeping geek culture like down for ages. And even now, like it's sort of coming to the light, but it's still sort of shakily coming to the light. You know, if you want to find these people, you kind of have to either know people or you have to know where they're kind of lurking around. You know, and even then, a lot of people don't leave their houses to go do this with people.
Yeah.
Um, for example, in my neck of the woods, we have what we call FIFO, or fly in, fly out. People who go work up in the mines, and it's a great idea. I know lots of people who do that and go play Dungeons and Dragons with the miners up on site. But at the same time, when they come back down to Perth, they're just like, oh no, beers and smokes and things, and flip flops and beaches, and that's just the nature of the beast. When you're here. So yeah, trying to dig people up is tricky, but you'll always find friendly people if you look under the right rock.
Yeah. Also, DMG Info is in Australia. He's not really an Aussie, but he's there. So
Yes.
Brian wants to know: can you walk us through how you would pitch a campaign to your players?
How I would pitch it. You know what? Actually, it's really funny you're saying that, because I do have a game coming up that I have I mean, literally just before I came in for this call, I was pitching this campaign idea. There are a couple of animators who are really, really noteworthy on YouTube. Blaine Simple, Eden, and JoeCat. So I'll be running a game for them on the Mercs of Mischief channel on June 13th at 5 p.m. Central, I think, or whatever you guys call. Let me just find the thing here. It's CST. What's CST?
Central.
Central. There you go. Oh, yeah. So June 13th, 5 p.m. CST. So what I normally do is I will always ask my players first and foremost to tell me a little bit about who they are, and to tell me what type of genres they enjoy, and to share one story about a favorite moment from role playing that they have had. What I then do is I label out little key moments, and then realize that this is what this person's looking for from my game. So one person from this group turned around and said, hey, I'm a fan of comedy adventures with like a little bit of mystery. I love suspense and horror, but I'm flexible. I like high fantasy, but I also like that sense of realism in my game. My favorite moment is when we had a really cringy scene where the GM set up 2 dates for some old merchants, where the bard had to kind of get them to get together, and it was really weird and awkward flirting between the GM and the bard, and that's what they enjoy. So I walk away with that information, and what I then do is I then cater something that touches on at least one thing from everyone's preferences. After which, I then pitch the story based on the game system that everyone liked, the basic premise of it, which will usually be something along the lines of, so you guys are a group of sailors coming back from a Viking raid as part of the Sveigard militia that has just recently landed at Port Norsk, and you have discovered that some brigand has stolen your ship. It is now up to you to pillage and maim across the western coast until you can find yourself a vessel worthy enough to take you either back home or to Valhalla. And that would be the premise of the game. At which point, I would then invite them to make their characters. So that's how I'd pitch a game, at least to individuals.
So, do you have a different approach as far as like whether it's a stream game or just a game you're playing with friends?
Yeah, and I feel really mean about saying this. So that's how I'd pitch a game if I was running a professional game. If I was running an in-home game, I'm basically of a mindset of, I'm running this, bitches. You can either join it or you can get out. That's literally it. I have no tolerance for my friends at all. I mean, you know what? That's part of Australian culture, though. Like, we are mean and horrible people to the people we love the most. So it's a case of like, yeah, I will tell my friends, like, okay, guys, listen, I'm running a Starfinder game. I haven't quite figured out this stuff, regarding the Vesk and why they're so pissed off. So I'm going to explore that a little. Do you want to play? Yes or no? And that'd be literally it. The good thing about having like a tiny little bit of celebrity pull is that I can turn around and go, well, if you don't want to go, I mean, I've always got like a million players that are raring to join me on this table. So that's never a problem. But I've never had anyone say no to me on any of those. And I've actually been fortunate enough to never have been boycotted as a GM before. No, that's actually been quite nice.
Yet.
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 Touch wood. Touch wood.
They're gonna show up with
I
picket signs outside your door.
Yeah, no, I did have someone walk out on me. I did have a rage quit at one of my games once. It was a cold winter's no. It was a friend of mine who had recently gotten to role playing and had really, really, really wanted to play a paladin. And naturally, I said, "Cool, that's no worries. You can play a paladin and stuff like that." We just try to avoid the typical dickhead paladin, the one that's like, you can't do anything because it's against the law, yada 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 yada. Because we had quite a mixed group. Naturally, that's what he played, and we ended up on a scene where he was on the river, and he was kind of sick of me always having excuses or making up reasons like DM fiat that have allowed the group to continue acting evil, or at least what he interpreted as evil, without him noticing. And we ended up on the river, and he was asked, do you want to take off your full plate? And he's like, no, we're going to get attacked on the river. And I'm like, okay. Naturally, they were attacked on the river, and he fell into the water. As he fell into the water, he sank. And he said, okay, cool, I'm going to hold my breath. And I'm like, hold on. You've fallen into the water. You've made your check, yada, yada, yada. You've got 20 plus rounds to try and get out. And he's like, yeah, no, I hold my breath, because if I hold my breath before I jump in, I get to double that amount of time. And I was like, well, no, you fell in. You didn't get to go and then jump in, so you don't get that 40 rounds. And he blew up. He just exploded and just like started swearing and cussing and because in his mind, he played this out already. No one likes me. No one's going to come save me. I can't swim to get out. And in 20 rounds, I'm going to be dead. And he just got up and left at that point. And I was just like, wow, that was interesting. I mean, and he wasn't going to die. I mean, like I was looking at that, and even with 20 rounds in tow and the group already having plans to rescue him, it was just a case of he was so in his own head that he just didn't pay any attention to it.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do? Sometimes it happens.
Sometimes. Oh yeah, absolutely,
we've
absolutely.
we've definitely had different instances at our tables over the years. Gamers, you get all kinds. There's not much you can do about that. But man, it's been fun. But we are up on the hour already. What do you want to say before
Oh
we head
wow,
on out?
dude, that happens so quickly.
It does. It does. First of
But
all,
thank you so much for.
what time
Oh,
is
you
it
going?
there right now?
It is just hit 1 a.m.,
Okay. Oh, that's not too bad.
which is okay. Yeah, yeah. Again, I don't sleep, so it's fine. But thank you so much for having me. I always have a wonderful time when we get to share each other's company and the like. I can't wait to finally broadcast the Christmas episode at some point or another with
Next Christmas.
David.
The
With yeah, with
2020
next
Christmas.
yeah, with Dave playing a giant lollipop wielding teddy bear.
Oh, that
So
was
just
fun.
that's a little bit of excitement for you guys. Like, yeah, I have footage of of
The only thing that would
so
have
hard
made it
as well.
better if I actually had a bear suit to wear.
Oh
Teddy
man,
bears.
or just the ears,
Yeah.
like I mean the little ears or a giant lollipop.
Yeah, ears and a giant. Maybe next time. Maybe next time.
Maybe
Well,
next
thanks for
time.
coming out. I appreciate it. I know it was really late for you. Until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.